So there's been another new partnership when it comes to Zebec, and it's with something called Anchorage. And no, I'm not talking about Anchorage, Alaska. I'm talking about a different type of Anchorage, but even though nothing I say is financial advice, this is supposedly a platform, right? Anchorage, and they say how it's like a platform that caters towards more the institutional side of things. So basically through this, institutions can allegedly now, kind of hold and manage ZBCN. So I do find this to be pretty cool because let's just imagine this. This kind of opens the doors to more institutions maybe getting exposure to something like Zebec, right? So why is that a bad thing? Because sometimes institutions out there, maybe they might care about something like this. It doesn't mean they would, or they would even care. Maybe in some cases, we'll wait and see. But now if there's an easier option for them to maybe do that through a platform much like Anchorage, which is basically catered towards the institutional side of things anyways, and now we see Zebec partnering up with something like that, why is that a bad thing? If Zebec could maybe have more exposure, I don't see it as a bad thing, actually. I think if anything, it could actually be a pretty good thing in terms of its, future, I guess, aspirations, if I even want to put it that way. Because if I take a look at, let's say, a celebrity, right, or a movie star, if let's say they have a trailer for a movie and let's say they, want to promote the movie, right? It would only make sense that they go to podcasts or like, let's say they make a post on social media. It only makes sense if they do that because, through these avenues, they get more exposure. And then that way, maybe the kind of notoriety of the movie, it kind of becomes more popular, right? So why not? The way you take a look at it, it's kind of like that in a sense. In this case, not exactly, but I think you get what I mean. It's just kind of like an analogy that I would have when it comes to this. However, even besides that, people like to say, well, who cares about the institutional side of things? Well, institutions, they usually have a lot of capital, they usually have a lot of resources, a lot of like, just I guess volume to kind of, in a sense, promote growth at a much larger scale when compared to, let's say, maybe the retail side of things in some cases. So I do find this to be a pretty interesting thing. Now, did Zebec really need to do this? I mean, I don't see a lot of people asking for it, at least from what I can see. But if they're doing it anyways, I think it showcases that they're trying to go above and beyond what a lot of other people are expecting them to be, right? Because had they not done this, basically, who's going to complain? Like, let's say Zebec randomly made a post and said, oh yeah, we're not going to be partnering up with something called Anchorage. Who's going to complain? I highly doubt that many people would complain, right? Because a lot of people probably wouldn't have even thought about that. I wouldn't even have thought about that either. But again, they're doing it anyways. It's kind of like doing extra credit, right? I mean, is it really necessary sometimes? Probably not, but in some cases it could be. So I like the effort that they're putting. Now, when it comes to Zebec as well, people like to say, well, this is irrelevant though, who cares? Well, I don't think about it that way, right? I mean, it's not like it really loses out to its closest competitor, which is XCN, or should I say Onyx. They pretty much have around the same market cap as of right now. ZBCN has a market cap of around 200 million, so does XCN. So when some people may say, oh, ZBCN is relevant, so does that mean XCN is also relevant? Because that's its closest competitor, right? That's the thing. So it's not like Zebec is experiencing something that we haven't seen other projects experience. No, that's not the case. Even its closest competitor as of right now, which is Onyx, it's also had a major pullback, much like ZBCN. So I don't view this as anything like so, I guess, negative. The altcoin space is not doing the best. Naturally, something like this also kind of went down as well. It kind of went along with the ride, basically. But if let's say the market maybe does recover, what has been kind of showcased time and time again to gain that sort of attention again? It is the global trade and finance space, in my opinion. But historically, we've only kind of seen two projects really have the most focus when it comes to that, right? It's like Ripple and Stellar. That's been kind of it for quite a while. Now, XDC kind of, started to appear here and there. However, it hasn't become mainstream, much like Stellar or Ripple. So pretty much the global trade and finance space within this space has been pretty much, again, dominated by just Ripple and Stellar. There hasn't really been like a solid number 4, number 5 and all this. However, if we take a look at something like Zebec, just because, the market cap as of right now is around 200 million. It has backers like Solana Ventures and as well as Circle, which is the creator of USDC. And we take a look at an aspect of ISO 20022 when it comes to Zebec. Furthermore, we take a look at also what it did with the super app, right? When I take a look at all that right there, what happens if there is a hypothetical altcoin season and the narrative starts becoming alternatives beyond Ripple and Stellar, but yet still within that niche of global trade and finance? What happens if that's the case? Guess who's waiting there in the wings, basically? It's something like not only XDC, but Zebec as well, right? Something like Onyx, something like XPR, something like Swiftcoin, because they haven't become massive narratives yet. Again, these other alternatives beyond Ripple and Stellar in a mainstream type of way. They just haven't become, I guess, in that level. But what happens if that narrative does form, right? Because we've seen narratives form here and there sometimes randomly during a hypothetical altcoin season. Does it mean it will have the best attention of all time? I mean, probably not. But imagine if there was kind of more attention when it comes to a project like Zebec, which I do view it as kind of like a miniature version of Ripple and Stellar in a sense. However, of course, ZBCN just has a way lower market cap than something like XLM, for instance. But that's the way you take a look at it. I think Zebec is kind of a miniature version of that because it's focused on global trade and finance, primarily speaking, and it also has an aspect of ISO 20022. So what happens if something like this becomes a narrative? Maybe, if let's say there was a hypothetical altcoin season. I'm going to be very happy if that's the case, but only time will tell. But ZBCN doesn't even need a hypothetical altcoin season at this point, in my opinion. This is just a way to take a look at it, because if it went back to like a 500 million market cap, in which we've seen before in 2025, considering we're at around a 200 million market cap right now, so we're around 2.5 times lower than that. Again, if it could just go back to that previous point, I'm already very excited actually in the grand scheme of things, but we'll wait and see, right? But I don't think I saw an altcoin season in 2025, so if it could just maybe go back to that level, I'd be pretty excited, but yeah, only time will tell. But either way, if there is no altcoin season and things just return back to like certain points in 2025, even at that point, I'd already be pretty happy. But if let's say there was a hypothetical altcoin season, I'd be happier. But again, there's no way I could control this, right? I mean, what can I do? I'm just one person. But in the meantime, I'm going to be holding, waiting, and I think that's pretty much about it, even though, again, I am not telling anyone to do anything. However, I want to say thank you for watching, and I hope you all have a very nice day. It's Willie the Captain. I'm out. Peace. Bye.